Hey everyone, my name is Chaplain Ryan Pearse, and I'm one of the chaplains here at 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division.
Hey guys, I'm Chaplain Luke Redmond, also a chaplain here at 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division, the best brigade in the 10th Mountain Division.
And over the next few minutes, Chaplain Redmond and I are going to talk to you about the 7 habits of a highly successful person. Hey everyone, Chaplain Ryan Pearse here again. Go ahead and get out a piece of paper and pen and get ready to take some notes. Before I talk to you about the first habit of a highly successful person, let me go ahead and give you a quick overview. The 7 habits of a highly successful person go by a few different names. The 7 habits of a highly successful person, an effective person, or a successful, effective soldier. Those names are pretty much interchangeable. The first question you need to ask yourself is this: do you want to be a successful or effective person or soldier? Now, obviously, the answer should be yes. And if you want to be a successful or effective person and soldier, then you'll want to follow all of the 7 habits. Now, in my opinion, the key word here is highly. If you want to be successful and effective, then you only need to follow 2, 3, or 4 of the habits. If you want to be a highly successful soldier, if you want to be a highly effective person, then you need to follow all of the 7 habits. And there are 7 habits, not 2, not 3, not 4. You got to be able to follow all of them, and they have to be a habit. And what is a habit? Well, obviously a habit is something that you do over and over again. So if you say, hey, I do all 7 of these, but I only do them sometimes, well, then they're not habits. You have to be intentional about doing all 7 of these habits. The 7 Habits of a Highly Successful Person was a book and curriculum started by a man by the name of Stephen Covey many years ago. So, do you want to be successful and effective? The answer is yes. Let's go ahead and follow all 7 of these habits. Starting with the first habit. Go ahead and write this down. Be proactive. This is the first habit. It's the most foundational, maybe the most important, and that's why they put it first, of all of the 7 habits. There's a Latin expression that's called sua sponte, and sua sponte means of your own accord. The Latin expression sua sponte is basically an encouragement of proactivity. In the absence of orders, if no one else is around to tell you what to do, you need to sua sponte. You need to be proactive. Unfortunately, there's a lot of soldiers, even high-ranking soldiers, who are not proactive. They're reactive. You ask them, what are you doing? And they say, well, I'm just sitting here. I'm just waiting to be told what to do. A highly effective person doesn't wait to be told what to do. A highly effective person is proactive. So go ahead and get after it. Be proactive. That's the first habit. Go ahead and take a look at this slide. This is what Stephen Covey says about being proactive, the first habit. If you are not proactive, your circle of control and influence shrinks, maybe to nothing. But the more proactive you are, the circle of control, the circle of influence that you have grows and grows, and that's a good thing. So the first step, the first habit in being a highly successful person and a highly effective soldier is to be proactive. Don't sit around. Don't be reactive. Be proactive. Let's go ahead and listen to Chaplain Redmond as he talks to us about the second habit.
Chaplain Luke Redmond here. The number 2 habit is begin with the end in mind. As Chaplain Pearse referenced, first is being proactive. Number 2 is beginning with the end in mind. This is like having a destination or a flight plan in mind before you ever leave the ground. This is like GPS saying recalculating as you begin to veer off track. Have you ever had that happen in your phone, in your car, driving down the road? This is a roadmap of life that we're talking about here, and we need to stay on track. We need to stay the course, but to do that, we need to know where we're going. Staying on track is a stability for success. That's why it's important. To be on track is like having a blueprint for a house, your home, starting with something that you can see the end state at the end before you even begin. This is fitness. This is a fitness plan to be healthy, have a healthy body, healthy practices. This is a conversation, more importantly, a well thought out conversation. This will enable you to have a better, lasting, longer relationships. This is the mission statement, right? This leads to a fulfilled life. Number 2, beginning with the end in mind, is all about a mission statement. From where you are now to where you want to be at the end. Look at this slide. Live with the purpose and vision. A careful, considered plan gives you the mental blueprint you need to create the desired outcome. Habit 2 is based on the principle that all things are created twice, first mentally and then physically. Highly effective people begin with the end in mind in all they do. What this is an example of is having a puzzle, but without a picture. Can you imagine sitting down with your family or your friends trying to construct a puzzle without the picture? A mission statement is exactly that. A mission statement is your picture to your puzzle.
The third habit in the 7 habits is put first things first. Go ahead and write that down. Put first things first. The third habit is my favorite habit, and in my opinion, the most important of all of the 7 habits. Put first things first. Let me direct you to a couple very important slides. The first slide is what's known as the big rocks versus small rocks. Now, the big rocks are the things that are the most important things in your life. The small rocks are the things that are not so important. If you have a container and you try to put all the small rocks in first, and then you put the big rocks in, you're not going to have space, you're not going to have time in the day to complete everything that you want to do. So what do you have to do? You have to identify and understand what your big rocks are. What are the most important things you need to do? And then you need to put those in the container first, and then you can go ahead and put the small rocks in there second. And then they'll trickle down and fill in the spaces, and you'll actually have time to do the big rocks and the small rocks. And even if you don't have time to do the small rocks, that's okay. Remember, we want to put first things first. So we want, at a minimum, to focus our attention and only do the big rocks. The second slide that I want to direct your attention to is what is known as the time matrix. Now you can see the time matrix is broken down into 4 quadrants. The first row, quadrants number 1 and quadrant number 1 and quadrant number 2, is important. That's the row of importance. The second row, quadrants number 3 and 4, are not important. So right off the bat, we can dismiss quadrants number 3 and 4, and I'll talk about those a little bit more in a second. But let's focus on quadrants number 1 and 2. Quadrant 1 is important and urgent. Quadrant number 2 is important and not urgent. Where should we spend most of our time? Now, most people immediately say quadrant number 1 because it is urgent. And make no mistake about it, if something is important and urgent, we have to deal with that thing. We have to direct whatever we're doing, we have to direct our attention to that. But where should we spend most of our time? The answer overwhelmingly is quadrant number 2. Quadrant number 2 is the quadrant of importance, but it's not urgent. And you can see all the important things, the necessary things that we're supposed to do in quadrant number 2. That is where we want to spend most of our time. That is where we want to put our first things first. And we do not want to be overcome by what is known as the tyranny of the urgent. Now, speaking of the tyranny of the urgent, quadrant number 3. It's urgent, but it's not important. And that quadrant is actually known as the quadrant of deception. And the reason it's known as the quadrant of deception is just because it's urgent, a lot of people think it's important. But do not be deceived. Just because it's urgent doesn't mean it's important. In fact, everything in quadrant number 3 is urgent but not important. So we need to identify what's not important, and we need to push it off to the side. Quadrant number 4 is known as quadrant of waste. It's not important, it's not urgent, it's basically just a wasteful quadrant. Everything you do in quadrant number 4 is a waste. It's not going to help you to be a highly successful or effective soldier. So we need to avoid quadrant number 4 at all costs. If you spend 20 hours over the weekend playing video games, that is not the marker of a highly successful person. The only saving grace in quadrant number 4 is that Every once in a while, you need to spend a few hours, watch TV, play video games, blow off steam, decompress. That's okay. But once again, where should we spend most of our time? Quadrant number 2. Put first things first. Focus our time and attention on the big rocks in your life. Identify and understand what they are and spend most of your time there. That is what habit number 3 is all about. Now let's go ahead and listen to habit number 4.
The number 4 habit is think win-win. There's 4 types of thinking. There's win-lose, there's lose-win, there's lose-lose, and of course, win-win. Now win-lose is I get the remote. Lose-win is you get the remote. Lose-lose is no one gets the remote because I smashed it against the wall. And win-win is let's decide together what we're going to watch, spend some time as a family. Win-win is an attitude. Win-win is a success for long-term relationships. Win-win is seed. Win-win is do. Persist in looking for win-win outcomes. Win-win is get. What is mutually beneficial to me and us in our relationship. The success for long-term relationships. The spirit of win-win is a desire to encourage, desire to impact one's sympathy, the desire to show interest, to banish fear, to build self-confidence. This is a spirit of win-win, to awaken hope in others. So think win-win.
Before I talk to you about the 5th habit in the 7 habits, let me go ahead and direct your attention to a slide called Your Personal Flight Plan. Now you'll see on that slide habits 1 through 7, but I want to direct your attention to 3 key words on this slide. On the bottom, you'll notice the word dependent. In the middle, independent, and then the 3rd word I want to direct your attention to is interdependent. If you don't do any of the 7 habits, you are a dependent person. You're not successful, you're definitely not highly successful, you depend on other people. If at a minimum you do habits 1 through 3, you move from a dependent person to an independent person. And an independent person, I would say, can be a successful and effective person. But you're not highly successful or highly effective until you do all 7 of the habits. When you move from independent to interdependent, what does that mean? Well, it means you're not just looking after yourself. You're not just a lone ranger or just a man on an island. You are now a team player. You now see the bigger picture. You are now interdependent with other people. And that is a highly successful and effective soldier. All right, what's the 5th habit? Write this down. The 5th habit is seek first to understand and then be understood. This is a pretty straightforward habit. We were created with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening at least twice as much as we are speaking. When I think of this habit, the 5th habit, there's a couple things that come to mind. First off, active listening. When you're listening to someone, are you actually listening to them to understand what they're saying, or are you listening to them to respond and say what you want to say? Active listening says we're actually listening. We are seeking first to understand what that person is saying before we give our opinion or we say what we want to say. The other thing, and the last thing that I want to point out, habit 5 really is about humility. Seek first to understand and then be understood has to do with humility. If you only care about your opinion, if you only care about your thoughts, then you don't really care what other people have to say. But we should. We should be humble enough to know that that other person knows something that we don't know, and we need to understand what they are saying before we try to get them to understand our point of view. The 5th habit, seek first to understand and then be understood. Let's go ahead and listen to Luke Redmond as he talks to us about the 6th habit.
Number 6 is synergize. Synergize is the spirit of energy to foster participation and not manipulation. Participation. This is seeking first to be understood, like number 5. This is being open to new ideas, being open to viewpoints, looking for win-wins, like number 4. Synergy is celebrating differences, celebrating cultures, celebrating backgrounds. This is teaming with one another. This is being open-minded. This is finding new and better ideas. There's a few rules to synergy though. There's valuing one another. With that comes valuing self first. There's recognizing strengths and weaknesses in one another. This also involves recognizing your own strengths and your own weaknesses. The principle of synergize is the whole is greater than the sum of all the parts.
The seventh habit, the last habit in the 7 habits, is known as sharpen the saw. Go ahead and write that down. Sharpen the saw. When I think of the 7th habit, I think of the Army value honor. Honor is the Army value that encapsulates and really ties together all of the other 6 Army values. Sharpen the saw encapsulates and really ties together habits 1 through 6. If you do not sharpen the saw, then you will suffer greatly trying to do habits 1 through 6. So what does sharpen the saw mean? Well, first off, you are the saw. You need to keep yourself sharp. And there are 4 big domains that we need to focus on: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. If you run yourself ragged, if you don't do self-care, if you don't keep yourself sharp, then you will not be able to do habits 1 through 6, and you will burn out. So the first thing that you need to think about for habit number 7 is keep yourself sharp so you can do habits 1 through 6. Now, once you've done that, the next step is to help sharpen the saw of your battle buddies. You keep yourself sharp and you keep your battle buddies sharp, and they will help to keep you sharp. Go ahead and institute some self-care. Don't get burnt out. And let's follow all of the 7 habits, 1 through 6, and then habit number 7, keep yourself sharp, sharpen the saw. Hey Patriots, remember 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division is the best brigade in all of 10th Mountain Division. And with your help, we can be even better. You just learned the 7 habits of a highly effective soldier.
Highly effective soldiers are highly lethal soldiers. The training you got here today will serve to make you successful on the battlefield. For Chaplain Ryan Pearse, I'm Chaplain Luke Redmond. Climb to glory.
To the top.